Firstly, just thanks everyone for giving up some time of your busy schedules to join us here today, and thanks to Fareed and the team at PwC here in Galway for coming on board to launch this series. It's a funding advisory series. There's going to be 3 talks starting off today: funding options for growing your business. We have a second one in January, focusing on tax, and it's called Maximizing Tax Reliefs to Fund Your Business. So Fareed and our team will be leading that one out. And then the third one is raising around in March. Will be applicable to some of the companies here in the building. We have 2 VCs lined up. We also have some PwC talk about getting investor ready. So just today, welcome our guest speaker. I think Fareed is going to moderate at the end of Q&A. Ulton Farley, I'd like to welcome. He's based in the building here at Westbury. Cage Band Ulton works for the Angel Investment. Welcome to Jonathan Kavanagh from the Western Development Commission. Chair Bodwick and Trevor is here, my local branch, Bank of Ireland. And last but by no means least, we hear a great story from John Brosnan, Rapid7, one of our longest serving client companies here in the GTC. And John has a great story to tell on his success and his funding. So look, I suppose a lot of you were at the T-show last week. Just for those who haven't seen, that's going to be our new building. And I suppose one of the key things what we want to do here at the GTC is to promote enterprise in the Western region, to Noreen's role, obviously, and myself, facilitate growth for the client companies here and create community here in the GTC. We're doing that through a lot of the great work that Sheila and Thomas are doing. So just before I hand over to Ulton, I just said, look, let's just give a quick overview on a business life cycle and the different stages of funding. And I suppose each of our speakers are going to be aligned to this graph. So, we've a couple of TY students as well. I was just giving them a bit of chat earlier on, and I said to one of them, what would you, if you had a business idea, what would you do? And he said, esports gaming. So I said, we took that concept. And so anyway, starting off, the first stage is an idea concept. Your funding options really here are, if you don't win the lotto, it's the 3 Fs: family, friends, and foods. So once you have a bit of funding in place with that, then and you have an idea. Once you need to get a product market fit, see is there a demand for that product, and then you move into yellow phase here. So the startup early stage. So here it's all about pre-revenue. You might have 3 to 5 staff. And here on the funding options here, it's a lot of the state aid, so a lot of the great work that your local enterprise Leo office would do. Enterprise Ireland, you've Ross as well, who are based in the Gaeltacht regions. And all of this we supported for one of our owners here, Westbig. So also at this stage, you have private money, and that's where Ulton is going to touch on here. A lot of the funding here is matched. So you might get 250,000 from Enterprise Ireland, and then there'll be an expectation of some private money. So the H-band network are very active in this space. We also then have EIS, which I know Fareed and our team will talk about in January, which is essentially a tax relief for private investment into a growing business. And then there's another option here, seed capital, which is the difference between, I suppose, the gap between private money and venture capital. And Jonathan will cover off some of this. I know they're primarily on the venture capital side, but I know Western Development Commission do look at seed capital also. So then once you're moving into the growth scaling, so you have validation for your product. So you're looking at, right, what other markets can I get to? Can I get export? Can I get outside? Look at more pilots. So it's really looking about scaling, getting into exports in multiple markets for your product or service. So here, your staff numbers are usually typically 5 to 20. You're generating revenue at this stage. Could be loss making, may or may not be, depending on the sector and how the business is performing. A lot of the med tech at this stage still be loss making. There's a lot of research and development. And here, I suppose, funding then really you're down to, I suppose, venture capital. Jonathan going to cover off that in his presentation. So you have obviously a Western Development Commission, one of the main VCs active in the Western region. You also have some of the bigger ones from Dublin, like Alpha, Elkstone, Delta Partners, Fountain. So two of them have confirmed that they'll talk at the March presentation. And then it'd be remiss, given my background in the banks, not to mention, I think the banks, again, it's on a case-by-case basis, and there, from Bank of Ireland will touch on this. Like the banks will lend at this stage, primarily, I suppose, maybe leasing, invoice discounting, factoring, which will have companies, on their cash flow, working capital needs. So once a company comes out at this stage, then you're blue for go, I suppose, into expansion. You're profitable. Here, I suppose, really it's down to it could be an exit strategy, or again, if the company wants to buy premises, obviously the banks will look at them, refer to them to the with a bit of bricks and mortar. But also here you're looking at private equity and M&A, mergers and acquisitions. And I suppose underpinning all of this here, through all of this, is having good advisors, having a good team. So, like as owners or founders of a company, your job, I suppose, or an owner, founder, is trying to focus on the technical side, maybe a bit of staff recruitment, having a good financial advisor. So someone like your PwC or other local accounts firm to advise you, and again linking in with any of the guys here that are going to speak today, the HBAN, ourselves, Westvic and WTC. So I'll hand over to Ulta now. So start off and your slides.
Sure. Let's see if that's okay. There's a few here that I've seen this a few times, so apologies for that. And I'll go very, very quickly through it, and maybe take more in the way of questions. That might work better. So carry on. HBAN, an all-island umbrella group. Okay, and what we're trying to do is, as it says there, to promote business angel investment and that concept of business angel investment, and to create business angel syndicates on the island. Okay, now as it happens, we're funded by Enterprise Ireland, Intertrade Ireland, and Invest NI, and as it happens, our 3-year funding phase is finished, so we have just submitted a new tender. So HBAN in some form will be here in the future. It may not be me, it may be somebody else. So what I'm talking to you now about, you can take as being, whether it's some party you'll deal with locally or somebody else in the future. What I'm talking about now will hold true into the future as well. Okay. These, we have, I think it's about 14 syndicates. We have a large number nationally. We have 4 internationally, 1 in New York, Digital Irish Angels. We have 1 in Singapore. We have a relatively recent one in Dubai, and we have 1 in London. And in an Irish context, we have syndicates all over the country, from Belfast down to Cork and Dublin to Galway. Some of those are general groups. Some of them are sector specific, like MedTech and IRIS, which focus on MedTech, life sciences, biotech, that sort of thing. We have Bloom, Boole, and the Forum groups. They focus on technology type projects. And then our local one, our West by Northwest one, for example, is a general one. So we will look at many different sectors. And I suppose the objective there for the West by Northwest one is it was set up by a man across the line, John Mullen. And his idea was, well, listen, I'm based now in Dublin. We're seeing lots of projects coming from the west of Ireland, coming up to Dublin, looking for funding. Why don't we set up something locally and do something for the region? So that was the idea. It was having the focus on projects from the west. So they're the syndicates that are available nationally. We've set up a one recently there, see in around Dublin, I mentioned food. We've got rid of the food one recently, and what we've got now with one of those places called the Impact Group. So on the whole area of sustainability, renewables, green, that whole area is something that we're looking at in terms of project. So few quick headlines. Last year, we invested in just over 70 startups. To put that in context, we see between 600 and 700 projects every year that come to us at different stages. And as you see, we only ever invest in approximately 10%. That 10%, there's no guarantee with them. They're not sure bets. You know, we take a view on them, our investors take a view on them, and they put the money into them. We also see lots of projects over the course of the year that we don't go with, that are very good projects in their own right, and have great potential as well. And sometimes it's just that we might feel they're just not ready right now. Sometimes it's a bad fit with our investors. And we might have groups of investors that don't just get a project or just don't have a feel for it and it doesn't fly. I was just chatting to Jonathan just beforehand. We're seeing a lot of flux now in the market as well. A lot of people double checking, treble checking, you know, checking, you know, looking for an awful lot of detail on projects. Much more so than they would have in the past. And opportunities that may have been funded last year or the year before aren't getting the same traction now. We've also had some instances where, particularly in the regional groups, where we might identify a project we think has some potential, and some of our investors will spend a bit of time on the project. You know, in the past, maybe going back 2 or 3 years ago, I can think of 2 projects that we worked with maybe for 12 to 15 months, eventually got funding into them. We have maybe 2 similar situations just recently where there's great goodwill towards the project, but people are just apprehensive, just with market conditions, etc. They're feeling we're not sure about this, and they're just keeping their money in their pocket. So let's say 80 million into 70 plus startups last year, and then that leverages a lot of other funding, a lot of other finance. WDC co-invest with a lot of projects that we put money into. Lots of the VCs put money in there. Enterprise Ireland, they co-invest as well in a lot of projects, and some of the money that we put in is important in accessing that funding for other projects, because I think, as Brian said there, for example, Enterprise Ireland or others might put in funding, but that won't be released until it's matched privately by privates, and that's what we're trying to do. Total just over 110 million last year. We've done around, at this stage, we've done about 650 projects funded since 2008. And you can see there leverage, well, invested 124 million. It's gone up now. But at the end of last year, had invested 124 million in projects and leveraged over 300. The average investment we put in per deal, about 250,000. That's not per investor. What we do is when a company comes and presents and we have an interest in it, we could have 6 or 7 people interested. We currently have a project with, I think, 37 people interested in it across 7 different syndicates. So if that goes to a positive scenario where we're going to invest, what happens is people put the money into a single pot and the promoter gets a single term sheet. Okay. So that average, I'm anticipating that at the end of this year, that will take quite a jump, because where we would have been putting in 250, you know, let's say on average, you know, that would vary between maybe 60,000 into a project, and currently we're looking at some projects where we're putting in maybe 1.5 to 2 million into some potentially. And projects across all sectors we look at. Few here, round spots you would have seen locally, I'm sure some of you know. we put a second round of investment into that with a few other when Enterprise Ireland put money into it. Dublin big tech fund put money into it as well. KSF based in the Westport, and two medtech ones here based in Galway, Blue Drop and Synthesis. Cytex is one that we've invested in at a national level. Very quickly here, what we're looking at when we're investing in a project is stronger you can be in terms of market traction, the better. Okay, that's not always easy to achieve. But if you've got customers, that puts you in a better position. If you've got regular customers, that's even better. If you don't have that, have you got purchase orders? Have you got letters of intent? If you don't have that, have you done paid trials? Have you got testimonials? Have you, okay, that's what we're looking at. Your assumptions, proven, discussed, investigated in detail. Things we're looking for. Team, we can't expect you to have a team in place. That's why you're looking for funding. But how good are you at your area of knowledge, your specialized area of knowledge? Where you have gaps, do you know what the gaps are? Have you identified people that will come in potentially to fill those gaps if you've got the funding in place? At a minimum, if you don't have identified the people, well, do you know what the key roles are and when they need to be filled? That's the core team. Another very important part of the team is your advisor group or your external experts who are contributing to what you're doing. So it's always a plus if you have a strong advisor or external panel that can support you and guide you and validate what you're doing. Market traction, as I say, we're looking for your commercial and your technical milestones. If we put in X amount of money, what are you going to do? What are the markers you're going to hit? We want to see ambition, but at the same time, we want to see realism in terms of what you're projecting that you're going to do and you can do. What you're asked, how much you're looking for, where you want to spend it, what are you going to do with it? We will need more funding after that. Then basic things like your business model, your competition, they all go to developing a compelling investor case. So I think that's it. Right, really, yeah. hman.org has a lot of resources available to anybody who wants to have a look at them and go through them. And I'll be here. I think we're doing the Q&A afterwards. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So thank you. We'll take questions later.
I'm going to follow up to the lead here and take a seat. So I'm an executive with the PwC Investment Fund. We're a state-run fund we have offices in Ballaghaderreen, Sligo, Galway, and lately I think Donegal as well. So it is a unique funding mechanism in the country, being that it's for the west of Ireland and none of the other regions in the country have one of these funds. So the west of Ireland is defined as the 5 counties of Connacht, as well as Donegal and Clare, so 7 counties in total. Your business has to be based there, and what we're there to do is to, I suppose, provide funding for you to grow a business and employment within the west of Ireland. So it is based on commercial investment. We're an evergreen fund, which means we don't get funded by the government anymore. We've been rolling over our own money since, I think, 2010. Initially, we got, I think, 25 million pounds, Irish pounds at the time, which is about 32 million euros. And the fund is now worth 90 million based on its last valuation. So it's done pretty well. We can't do any grant aid. So the fund itself is not allowed to do any state aid. So there's no grants or anything like that. It's all based on commercial investment. And we do it in tandem with private sector investors. Sorry. So this is just some highlights from the portfolio over the years. So I think they started investing in 2002. So they would have invested in about 300 enterprises over that time. And the total invested is 75 million, and we've leveraged about 350 million, which is defined by how much syndicated investment came in with us. and it's estimated we have supported about 6,000 jobs in that time in the region. So just some a profile of the fund then is we do require you to also have a commercial private investor to come in alongside us. So the state can only do 50% of the round, which means that ourselves and EI can only be a total of 50% in the round, which means that generally EI will be your first port of call here because they're earlier stage investors than us. And if they're able to do 50%, there won't be room for us. And then the other 50% will have to come from a private sector investor. So even if EI aren't involved when you come to us, we still need a private sector investor, and that's how we ensure that there's no state aid. So you do tend to have the private sector investor in place before we'll be able to look at your application, or at least almost over the line. And so we do require the same terms and conditions as the private sector then. So whatever's on your term sheet, we'll look to match those as long as we're happy with the terms, or we might even seek better terms. It's a little bit different to EI. So EI will do that sometimes, but they will also use their CTRPs, which we don't use. And so it's for West of Ireland based companies, as I mentioned, and we do try and follow our investment. So if you make significant progress, you will probably likely need a second round based on how early we go in. And we tend to try and keep our percentage so we can keep going. I suppose as long as the company is making progress, which is again a little bit different to West Ireland. And so these are some of our co-investors. EI, as I've mentioned, once the round is big enough, they might be in with us or be in earlier than us. So Ulton has brought you through the H-band network. And a lot of the companies that we see at our stage of investment, it is the angel investors who are kind of the first investors in the company and are often the ones matching us. But also we do work with a lot of VCs as well, and particularly in the later round. So for tech type investment, you have the likes of ACT and Delta. For medtech, you have the likes of LSP, Fountain, and then the angels are the likes of Earth, and the H-band network, as Ulton mentioned. There's also further now in Dublin as well, which somebody might know as DVIC, and they have their own venture fund now as well. So make sure you talk to them because they also have money. So our equity investments then, they tend to range from 250,000 to 2 million. So first round is typically 300 to 500. And again, this depends on the project. It depends on how much money you're raising, who else is coming in, and I suppose the terms of the investment as well. And so we can co-invest with the private sector, as I mentioned, and they have to make up 50% of the round. And then we're pari passu terms with them. So some of the things then that we would look for are a strong management team, or at the very least a path to it, as Ulton also mentioned. So you need to have a plan around how you're going to grow your team and how the company is going to be managed through its various stages, and particularly the stage that we're funding. And so the company needs to have significant growth potential and be in a large and fast growing market. And that all ties then what is your product and service, and what's the compelling USP that's going to make it grow within those markets. So our funding is high risk, high return, and we look for you to have an idea of how you're going to exit at some stage. And we generally say maybe 5 years, but obviously that's flexible. So some of the things that in general that investors look for, a strong management team, and I guess we're emphasizing that a lot to you today because it is important that you understand that investors are coming in and they're investing in you as people and the people around you, and you need to understand how that's going to flow and what the gaps are in your team and how you're going to fill them eventually. Ulton mentioned advisors. Just make sure you're actually asking them to be advisors and not just sticking them in their business plan. So we do talk to these people, and we want to make sure that they have a role within the company because we rely on them to help you and to grow and to build out your board. So a large and fast growing opportunity. It's key for venture capital that the company has an ability to grow within the market and that you have an ability to do that. And then the valuations as well. So we don't set valuations, we agree to them, I guess. So your private sector investors will set the valuation. And I guess, all I'd say to you is be open-minded around valuations, have an idea of what you think you're worth, but I guess the company is worth what people will take their shares for. So a viable, intelligent business plan, and a deck is not a business plan. So over the last few years, we've been getting, the first thing we get is a deck, and we basically have to go back to the companies and say, look, we need you to actually plot out your business plan for us so that we can understand it and we can test it and test the assumptions and talk to people about it. So it's not just about being able to have that 10-minute pitch, which is important, but it's also about being able to, I suppose, bring in the detail behind that and explain to people why your company deserves to get funded. And then accurate and timely information. So also understand investors are assessing you as a CEO or as a team from the first minute you talk to them. So just, I suppose, I would wait to approach them until you're able to actually give them accurate and timely information. So, you know, if they're asking you for a business plan and you're saying, well, I don't have one yet, it'll be 6 months, you're too early to be speaking to them. You should be able to give them the information that they require when they need it. Have your financial forecast ready to go, or at the very least be able to tell them you're going to have them in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever it is. So then ESG and diversity, so these are becoming increasingly important. So it's just something for you to be aware of, just in terms of sustainability of the business and diversity within the business, which we're being asked about more and more by our board. So we do some loans as well. We don't do a lot of SME loans anymore because the banks are lending at a, you know, a decent tip, as I'm sure Gerard will outline to you. But we do some where the banks might not be happy to do them if you don't have security, but it is all based on evidence of repayment capacity. So it's past performance. We don't do it for startups or pre-revenue or really projection-led businesses. It's mainly for you're able to show us you're able to repay the loan. And we do some huge loans. So the wrap fund is another fund that we also have. I'm not sure if we have any film, TV, or gaming companies here. There we go. Okay, so this is for you. So we do mainly what the wrap fund has funded to date has been production funding. So productions of TV series within the West, and it has to be based mainly within the West. We do a convertible loan of up to 200,000. It's part of your larger funding package, and basically we fund with the other investors and we take money back when you make money, if you make money. So we also do company level funding. So if you have a company in this sector and you're trying to grow your IP, or you have an idea of how to I suppose you have a viable, good business plan on how to build your business, then we will also look at funding that. But that's a tougher sell. I suppose it's more business based than the production, which will be happening. So about that, I would say look at wrapfund.ie if you want more information around that, because we don't actually do that process. That's done through Ardon, which are based across the road here, I think, and they will take you through the whole process and help you understand whether you're a fit, and will help you with your application and everything. We just do the funding at the end. So sample of some of the portfolio companies, some of the tech companies you might have heard of. City Switch raised a large round earlier this year. So just trying to think who the other investors are there. Act, Irlandia, which is the Ryan family private office, and a number of private investors are in there. Prooptics is a tech company in Mayo. They're raising money again, actually. Alta Cloud, I'm sure you've heard of, or sold to Genesis there a few years ago. Sarah Everyon are a tech company in Donegal. Core Systems are a tech company in Carrick Shannon, which is doing very well. And then there's just a sample of other ones as well from MedTech. So Signum Surgical, Hook Bio, company down there. Pro is the rugby helmet. I don't know if any of you have seen that. They're trying to help players deal with or prevent concussion. It's a really innovative product. Canvas Medical then is a medtech company out in Spiddle, and Zero Tech is a battery company in Clare Galway. So there's a good range there. We do a lot of different sectors. Medtech is probably the main sector that we end up doing, just because they fit with where we invest our money, the type of syndicated investments where they're raising much larger rounds. But we do a lot of tech investments, and we have a good spread across different sectors and all across the region. So some of our realizations, Alta Cloud, as I mentioned, were sold to Genesis a few years back. Aerogen we're still invested in, but we reduced our stake when they raised money a few years back. Canvas Medical was sold to Freudenberg. Envo Medical was came out of the BioInnovate program in NYC and was sort of a very early stage. I think it could have been within a year actually. And Aaron Biomedical, you probably heard of last year, maybe it was earlier this year, were sold to Integer. And so the flavor of them. So we do rely on realization to help fund the growth of the fund and to be able to reinvest in the next batch. So our application process then is, if you go onto our website, westerndevelopment.ie, and investment funds, you can submit an inquiry there, and we would always say start by talking to us. So if you just submit your application, often you might be early stage, you know, you might not be a fit for us, you might not have your private sector investment. So we like to talk to you first and give you an understanding of who we invest in and understand your project and whether you're, I suppose, in a position to apply for us rather than just sending it back to you. So you can submit an inquiry by email or through the web portal. You can also apply through the web portal if you feel that you're at an advanced enough stage. The major thing with your application is there's a small application form, but it's also submit your business plan, which I've talked about, and have your financials ready to go as well, together with your assumptions, and that should tie into your business plan. And your private sector term sheet, we ask for you to have it. If you have it, submit it to us. If you're still in talks around it, you can just tell us that, but we will talk to the private sector investor really before we go anywhere with it. So you should be at an advanced enough stage with it. And just to mention around your financials, try and be realistic about them. So we know you think you're going to do amazing things over the coming years, and you know, absolutely talk us through that. But try and be realistic. What we're trying to figure out from your financials are when you're going to run out of money. So how much money do you need now? What's a realistic time frame for that money to last you? And when are you going to run out and need to raise more money? And then it's about what you can achieve in that time frame. So I think that's it.
Your Roderick, business manager, Bank of Ireland. Bank of Ireland Business Banking here. Heard that to follow that here, right?
Hi guys, as Brian said, my name is Stuart Broderick. I'm here just to talk you through the banking options as best we can provide. So as you see on the screen, there is four primarily: overdrafts, asset finance, invoice discounting, and term debt. Overdrafts, really, most companies have them in some form or another. They are mainly for working capital. They're probably not something that you should be looking at to expand your business, because they're the most expensive form of debt financing. The next is asset finance. That's primarily leasing or hire purchase. It's funding to fund your fleet, equipment, or any office machinery. It's generally between 3 and 5 years. We can lend up to 90% of the total. We're putting new equipment into your premises. You are buying a new fleet of machinery or cars, we can do 80 to 90% of that. Also, we do sale and lease back. So if you have bought a car or a piece of machinery in the last 3 months, you can still finance it up to 80%. That, as I said, they're secured in on the assets that we are funding. A recent development is insurance premium finance. As insurance costs have increased over the last couple of years, businesses now are coming to us for financing for them. So what it means is we pay your insurance premium up front, and then you pay us back over the course of 10 or 11 months. So effectively, it spreads the cost of your insurance over the course of 12 months. It's pretty much an unsecured facility, but it's something that companies have used a lot in recent years, and it is very, very popular. Invoice discounting, what that does is it gives companies access to their outstanding invoices front up. So instead of having to wait for 60 or 90 days for payment of your invoices, the bank pays for those now. So it's very much driven for people with larger debtor books. Just take, for example, if you were in the food industry and you were supplying into Lidl, Aldi, or Tesco, obviously they're large debtors, and we will lend you the money now, and then Tesco or Aldi will pay us. Now, they don't know they're paying us, but it's into a BOI account that is secured through the invoice discount. Similarly, in medtech or technology, if you were supplying into Boston or to Medtronic or to Merck Medical, we will give you the funding up front. You can get that straight away, as opposed to having to wait 60 to 90 days. So it's a very useful for working capital. For a lot of larger companies would use it for the working capital. And then term debt, that can be secured, unsecured. It can be as little or as much as you're looking for. Varying terms and conditions attaching to it. The maximum term generally for trading businesses would be 15 years. So anything from 2, 3, 4 years up to 15 years. The last couple of years, Strategic Bank Corporation of Ireland, when you move to the next slide there, were launched. So what the SPCI are, they're a government agency that were funded or set up in 2014 to make low cost funding available to Irish SMEs. So what that means really is it's become very, very popular for companies who don't have bricks and mortar security to give to a bank. Companies that would be sometimes in their early stages, but they don't own their premises, they don't own their company, they can't give that security to the bank. So what it effectively means is that the SPCI are providing a state guarantee for generally up to 80% of the funding that you are to finance the Bank of Ireland are providing. A couple of schemes which have been run in the last couple of years, the credit guarantee scheme, that was 80% funding for up to a 7-year term, the state guaranteed up to 80%. There was a Brexit and a COVID working capital scheme. They were for business companies that were impacted detrimentally by Brexit and by COVID. They could borrow up to €1.5 million over 3 years. Up to 500,000 of it is unsecured, and again 80% underwritten by the government, by the SPCI, and the rates are very, very competitive. They're very competitive and would be generally cheaper than what we could lend it to as a standard term debt. And the most popular one that we've had in the last couple of years, the Future Growth Loan Scheme, it was again up to €500,000 unsecured, 80% state guaranteed, and a term of 7 to 10 years for companies that were funding expansion and working capital. So the schemes have been so popular that they're currently maxed out. There's no available schemes at the moment in time, but we expect that there's another one. They're working with the department at the moment to launch another one, which we would hope to be live in 2023. The main thing with the SPCI, there's just one more layer that you need to go to the SPCI website, apply for the funding through the SPCI, through the Future Growth Loan Scheme, fill in your details, do a brief application form that can be assessed. Now, it's not underwritten by the SPCI, it's assessed by the SPCI. If they feel that you're eligible for it, they'll give you a code, and then you come to us with the code, and we do the rest. So, term debt, what do you need? It's in general, it's very similar to what Ultan and Jonathan would be looking for. 3 years accounts, they will need to show repayment capacity in general, projections for the business, and then your business plan. Again, I don't want to pieces, but at the same stage, it has to, no more than what Ultan and Jonathan says earlier on. It has to tell us who you are, what you do, and how long you're doing it for, what you're planning on doing, and how you intend to pay us back. What we look at really is the people that we're borrowing the money to, how you're going to pay it back, and if you can't pay it back, what's your security? And the SPCI really has been giving us huge ability to borrow, to lend to companies in the last couple of years that wouldn't traditionally have been able to secure bank funding because they wouldn't have had security to give us, whereas the SPCI has been a good option for companies and has given us the ability to do it. I suppose the last thing is, don't assume we won't be interested. We may well be interested. Give us a call, we'll have a chat. It might be too early for us, but you never know. We're very much open to speaking with companies, and we'll do our best to support you if possible. My details are there. I'm working the business banking team. Trevor Gardner is here as well. Trevor is the branch manager in the branch in Review next door. He looks after the business and personal customers for the park here and for the area in general. We're more than happy to talk to you. Sure. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm going to invite John Brosnan and Sarita to take us through John's journey, and the guys can join at the end for his Q&A.
So I suppose just to kick off here, the point here, why we thought it would be useful to bring in a business into this is to bring what the lads were talking about there to life in a real life context. And My first question to John will be about Netport, and you're like, hold on a second, he's Rapid7, but the startup here was Netport, and he's going to talk us through now its funding journey and how he ended up basically as a successful acquisition by Rapid7.
Yeah. Long hard road, but yeah, I guess so. My own background was I'm a mechanical engineer. I graduated in about Galway for 10 years and became a PhD. And then I saw like one of the things I always believe in companies know their niche, but people for a person, how do you do that? So I was going to write device driver software, very low level software, and the VC back staff from everybody. We're setting up Galway up near Tom Owen's garage. And it's one of the things about multinationals. Like PhD a great company. And they've learned so much, especially in your first job. But sometimes you get too comfortable, can't believe, you know. So but I just saw the ads and few of us in the group started interviewing and we got employed with the job. And the company was at a very early stage, like there were 6 people. And we were along with them for 6 years, and like they were funded by SoftBank and Shu Ice these things. They raised $25 million. Because at that time this was like say on to 98, 99, like there was a bubble going.
Yeah.
And they bought everything. I mean the waste of the money was just like I'm planning back on carry it. Yes. And like it was just
You have 3 more money down there and
a massive shock for the student.
Yeah.
I mean, after maybe 3 years getting no sales, and the company was doing very badly wrong. And they had their launch party in Glenlow Abbey, and they flew everybody from all over the world. Like there were 50 people to Glenlow Abbey. And we had a free bar at night. And I tell you, we used that free bar. Like there's a few fellas. And they gave us 2 things when we left. A bottle of champagne and a pen. And I was just like I lost the bottle of champagne, I was so drunken. But
it's not like a curry man now.
but I had to pay. Anyway, I suppose 2 years later, I was in an Apple shop to pick my watch. I was looking, and it's meant to wait 2 minutes to be ready. And I saw these Mont Blancs. I said, Jesus Christ, this they gave us. And I was talking to my wife, where's that pen? It was up in the attic, like €700 pens each. So then I saw an ad, and then I thought like there's no way they were spending the money to pick their own. It was just and the realism of the company wasn't there. And I saw an ad, the advertiser, and it was a technology input phone. This was 2002. And the ad, if you want to be your own boss. And I said, well, I think we can do a better job in this group. So there was an interview process over NURG. And it was sponsored by NURG in Bazaar and actually Westbrook. This program. 10 people got on the program. It was Fridays in the college. Like we did mini MBA, mentors, kept right your business plan, an office space, 9 other guys trying to set up a company. 40,000, like the feasibility grant was what we got. That was our first fund. €40,000 on 40,000 pounds.
And when you say we, or each of you, but it was your, yeah.
I was on the full bank.
Okay.
Now we were looking, I suppose, the rest of the guys, there was 2 other guys I asked who they set up, and I said straight away, yes. They were working away in the background full time, so
okay. They
were making money. And part time, we were trying to get an LVP now, and I was working full time at this. Now after 15 years, well, you know, we had like myself, my wife had got laid off from business, so she had that redundancy package. So the deal was after the year that if you had maybe a few sales and a team, which we and I was the guy selling, because nobody else could sell, I'd be sold about 50K in a year of the product. That in the person will come in, they want the company to set up. And they said, you know, if you the deal, we were trying to get 200K together. So that time was a BMW region company, they put in slightly more than half. So I think we put in maybe 140. And between ourselves, 3 founders, we got that money, put in the C capital scheme, got a lot of tax back. And I put in grants. We had 50, so we had 250K. And we had 5 people. We set up.
And launch party in Dunlop?
No, that's not even that. That's a point on Supermax. But so like it was really exciting time, you know. It was tough though because That like
I was
250,000.
going to say you probably got 350 was a lot.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, at that time, like, no,
It was.
we're in 2002. You know, the valuations were low. There was like, Galway was a different city.
Yeah.
You know, it was on May usually. We actually went to BC then and was involved in the program. Not listening, somebody else. And I went to a friend, he offered us money. He said, I think he was 400,000 maybe for a big chocolate company. And I was thinking, I see, you know, 400,000 plus now 800,000. That's going to be people's for a while. And then again, thinking, that would take a lot of heat off me. I was thought my wife said, I think we should take this, you know, and she said, well, do you talk to me to get financial advice we're talking about here? And we were all engineers. We were outside of the main, you know. So I got a friend who had started up his own company, brought him into the meeting. He was quizzing your man and said, how come that valuation is that and all this? And he came back to me and said, what are you going to use this money for? You need it now. I was thinking, well, I've got to put the bank in there, first of all. So we can take it. And
had you gone out looking for that finance?
well, not really, you know,
You mean
it's how it goes, you know.
Okay.
And there was like, you know, there was so few samples that time around Galway.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
so
They were just looking for something.
yeah, there were, yeah. Well, you know, I know first like we were like talking about all the stuff that the guys put up there, like John makes sense about like have you got sales, have you got a team, have you got validation?
Yeah.
And we were engineers and we actually didn't know that we could sell something. We know we said we didn't know we could write it.
Yeah.
So we said, okay, even for ourselves, prove to ourselves in that year or two that we could sell something was a huge step. And we said, okay, and I think if you're investing in the company and involved in some other stuff at the moment, and I love to see founders put money in, it really shows their commitment, you know. And I know circumstances are different.
Yeah.
But so we really worked it for 2 years. We got 2 years roll out of that, up to that and sales.
Yeah.
And then we had customers like FA and Wembley. We had a lot of universities in town. We sold locally first. Yeah, and we said we can't sell on those. Said possibly find we got to the UK. Then we sold in the UK, and we were like doing about over a million in revenue maybe. And we said let's try and go up the state. And we looked for money again. And I suppose about 4 years in now at this stage, and we engaged with some American VCs, and that was interesting. Like one of them, they were really interested in taking us on board, and they said, one of the guys said to me, how can we keep, so in between this actually, so I skipped a step. We took maybe 400,000 BS money from family and friends, so in Kerry mostly. Now, that's good and bad, you know. The family can be interested in our money, and every head, like we ended up with 30 shareholders. Like some put in 30K, some put in 10 to 80K. You know, they got their tax back. In between, we're good to know because we're on time. We had an approach, an acquisition after maybe 7 years, and that failed at the very late stage, where all the shareholders thought they were getting the money back, and to go back to them and say the deal is off. And it was like, wow, it was really tough. That was during the recession. They needed their money back as well. So the VC company came along in Austin, and they said, how can we put money into the company, get rid of all the shareholders as cheaply as possible, and keep the rest of the money at the scale? And I said to them, that's not going to happen. They said, why not? I said, it's my family and friends. We're not doing it. We didn't do the deal. And we did another BS round, and we walked it out through sales. That's the kind of story we did. We always invested in our tech. We kept the core technology team together. And at the end of the day, when we're at the second game, after 15 years, and they were making an approach, and I said, we're talking about valuation. And he said, this is a tech and team deal. So it was a team of tech engineers and technology we had that made our valuation. We had a total investment of 2 million, and the return was over 10 times. You know, so what it worked out, we were maybe looking for like at times for sure.
Yeah.
But like I would say it was kind of a bootstrap thing over the last 5 or 6 years, and it was stressful, you know, having to make sales. Our deal was that We wanted to make a profit every year. We had recurring revenue from the customers. We had 250 customers, like, and with some big ones like Paddy Power. Their recurring revenue was we kept we're going to pay our costs. And any new business was profitable.
Yeah.
So by the time Rapid 7 came to us, we had 2 million cash in the bank. We didn't know what to do with it. We were afraid that we'd go up in America because we take more than that.
Okay.
But we had that cash and we didn't have to do anything. You know, we said to Rapid 7, we want to go over in America, we have to spend everything. So that helped in negotiation a lot.
Because you didn't need them.
No?
Yeah.
We wanted them.
Yeah, it's a great position to be in,
Yeah,
you
it
know.
was, yeah.
And it's one thing that I was going to draw out in relation to WDC, say that they need an exit. And often when I'm talking to founders, that is, you know, ultimately where you want to be, but you also need to portray this, I suppose, that you've skin in the game, that you're here for the long term, that you actually don't want a purchaser because you think you can make it on your own. How did you balance? Well, I suppose you were in the position that you didn't actually need the purchase.
Yeah, we wanted to jump. Like we were there. So like, look at us, like to be honest, like, we thought that was like we were 15 years on the board. That's it.
Yeah.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
It was, you know, when it was an Austin-based company, when enough Sullivan's that it very well known company that had tried to buy us 5 years before that.
Yeah.
And that was after 7 years, say.
That was the field.
That was a failed, yeah. And like that was 4 months of hell, man. That was like, you know, our legal cost for that deal because the teams fall apart all the time.
Yeah.
This fell apart for the week before the close. And our legal costs were 147,000 euro alone. And we had, and as well as the stress in the headspace for a following year before that. But, I mean, you know, did we think that it would come back, that we would get another deal?
A better deal.
With immediately, like we had people knocking on the door all the time, but I mean, they were wasting our time.
Yeah.
They would go so far. Maybe come to Galway. I don't know, we didn't get any more offers in that 5 year period.
Yeah.
We had interest all the time,
Yeah.
because we had this little niche, you know, and when Rapid 7 appeared, I knew that these guys were perfect for us.
Yeah.
But we were going along, I suppose, and we weren't scared because we weren't too sure how in the States, but we weren't too sure the next step.
Yeah.
We were nearly afraid. Like I suppose one of the things we look all the time is engineers, and the previous startups we were involved in, there were 1 or 2 startups. We saw that the guys eventually lost control of the startups because they didn't execute, they didn't sell, they didn't work out, and basically the humble kicked out of that. And we were saying, that's not going to happen. So we were determined that we would have accumulated cash at the end. There would have those options that we were trying to sell. But where we were going long term, or we were going to exit,
Yeah.
that's your question. We weren't sure.
Yeah.
We weren't sure.
Yeah.
You know, we're hoping that we knew that if we kept developing the tech in that niche,
Yeah.
and it was a very small niche, because on the first phone call about this time 4 years ago, the Rapid 7 came to us, and I was downstairs giving the demo. And I was sitting by, I had another guy with me, listening to the call, taking down notes. And the VP, Sam Adams, came along, and the pretense of the call was that they were going to license our software.
Okay.
And he said, he's going along. It was an hour Zoom call. He said, keep going, it's too important. And no, hour and a half there. And he said during the call, he said, we've been looking for technology like this for a while. And you know something? There's not much like it out there. I was thinking, did you hear that? That was a Thursday.
Yeah.
And it's beginning of December. And then he said, okay, that was interesting. It was we're still interested in licensing software. It's the end of the quarter. We're busy. We'll get back to you in January. I said, we're busy too. My mom's happy. They're like, Tuesday, Tuesday, he came along. He said to me, the following Tuesday, he said, our plans have changed. Can we talk tomorrow? And I was watching the website during the weekend, do analytics. And I saw all these hits on Saturday and Sunday in Boston.
On your website.
On our website,
Okay.
to our management bios page.
And your LinkedIn must be blessed.
I was thinking, this is interesting. And Tuesday he came on board and he came on, I have another guy with me. I said, who was that? Conan Reedy, and I was their VP of M&A. And 2 minutes into the call, Conan said, John, 2 questions. Is there a VC involved? All this and all. I said, no. I said, we're interested, we're wondering if instead of a partnership, we can do an acquisition. And I was thinking like I didn't do it, but I just employed for a minute. I said, well,
You don't think them or Harvard?
we have this cash in the bank, we're ready to go for the States. Well, you know, if valuation was right, we would definitely talk to them, but we know there's a good fit. And that's upset. And you know, we had some options there with the cash, with the team, together still before the engineering team stayed all along.
Yeah,
And the phone there, so like they straight away you could see these guys are serious. You know, they came over here a few times. They gave us like a negotiation happened in that room down there, a few calls, and I started and I knew they wanted it, you know, so.
on that valuation point, if we have time and we're probably still here, bring in the lads. I don't know if you
I'm
want
down
to
to
early
my.
already. Welcome. Yeah, I was interested in what you were saying on the valuations. I think it was your slide also that said about them being always a bone of contention.
That's mine.
Oh, yours, yeah, and but also that you know, it's what a buyer is willing to pay as opposed to what you think it is. But like, you know, John went in knowing or thinking X in his head, and you know, he is closer to the business and obviously he has a target. So how do you see that working out from your point of view when you are investing, or maybe more so on your end, really? Because you were saying it's private investors that drive it.
Yeah, so well, we see a lot, and there was a lot of red flags for you. I think when you know you were thinking about what somebody was offering you, and I'd say the first thing was it was one guy you were talking to, and the first thing I do is I try and sense check that and see, you know, what do other people think of your valuations, like people in peers, your network, talk to them and go, you know, and you don't have to give them all the details. I think you need to have an idea of what your business is worth, and it sounds like you absolutely did, and did the right thing, obviously, in the end as well. So it's kind of, I do think of it as a range.
Yeah.
So, you know, I wouldn't think, you know, my business is worth 5 million. I might be thinking it's worth between 3 and 7 or something like that, somewhere in there. And depending on who you're talking to, on what day, what's happening in the market, you can get different prices for it. But you have to do a deal that you're happy with. And I think nearly more importantly, with people that are happy with. And I think your story I thought was excellent because it really sounded like you were very, very patient with what you were doing with the business. And you were waiting for that right deal to come along and the right team to come along.
We thought we stuck with our niche now, take people do it. I mean, you're right about the valuation on top of the different people, and especially at the moment, as we're saying, things are getting a bit tricky out there. You know, we can see the status with us, Rapid 7 now. They're getting cautious, you know. But I suppose the one when we were doing the acquisition, the second one, I had the benchmark of the first offer.
Okay.
Which was a good offer.
Yeah.
Cash deal only. And I said, I was thinking to myself, I want that. And 50% more.
Yeah.
That was the number I had in my head.
Okay.
And that's what we done. You know, because I wanted to go back to the shareholder as well. And for my own self, like, look at what we got now. And I got a lot of shit. Like, most people too. I understand very much. But I want, like, I really want that. To be honest.
And is this a case of like that, you know, kind of like what we'd see on Dragon's Den, that the investors try and beat down the valuation and pick holes in it?
Eventually they will. But it's like Jonathan said, if you go in with something realistic, which you can stand over. They'll respect you for that. We see people coming out with valuations of, we saw one recently, somebody valued in 7 million. No customers, you know, ridiculous. And you know, there's no justification for it. You know, those proof points that I put up there and Jonathan put up as well around the team, from market, around your ask, you know, your plan, you know, realistic, ambitious,
Mm.
but realistic. There, that's the foundation, that's the starting point. We would say to companies, to promoters, like John said, have an ambition for yourself in terms of what you want out of this. Because if you're going to be in that business over a long period of time, you've got to have something that is valuable to you,
Mm.
that you're motivated to work towards.
Yeah.
So, you have to go for something, you have to be ambitious, but it has to be realistic. And investors will respect it for that. But again, the investor then will turn around and say, well, listen, we're the ones giving you the start here. We're
Yeah.
the ones that will help you make this happen.
Mm.
And we're taking on an awful lot of the risk. And we want to get the biggest bang for the buck that we can get.
Absolutely.
So somewhere in the middle of those, the
Mm.
truth, sits,
Yeah.
the truth lies, and you come to a conclusion. And coming up with a valuation, there's no magic bullet, there's no, this is the way to do it. And it comes down to a bit of horse trading. And we'd have a few instances where we have investors that we love the idea.
Yeah.
We're not talking to that valuation.
Okay.
We love it. We think there's great potential in it. We like the idea. We like the team, but that valuation is off the wall, and we're not going to waste our time or your time. Get off and love it. Come back to us if you want, but if you don't want to, that's fine. Good luck. Other instances as well. Some people will come in with a valuation that ordinarily might be off the wall, but some of our investors will put on the jersey and say it's Irish, or it's from Mayo, or it's from Kerry, or I want to be involved in it, or there's a bit of FOMO with it. You don't often get that,
Yeah.
but sometimes that happens as well. So it's a very movable piece.
But what one of these is that's all very true. I mean, so around there, so one of the guys who, like, we were looking at valuation and getting advice, and we had no financial background. Good friend of ours, Tom Ford, back here in the bank of college last year, he's my rugby coach in Clinton, and he was the bank of the college at the time. He's been the as a
You still had your student banker.
yeah, he was like, I think he's giving me advice. I would say, one thing I would say as well, that when we're offered that PwC money,
Yeah.
first time, that we're all to the
Yeah.
I was thinking. We had no clue what the next 2 years, what we had to go through. And it's like you almost have to go through that bit of pain
Yeah.
and learn yourself. As you would say, it's like time of validation. Because like some of the predictions and the rock, it's just off the wall. People have no clue what it is. Like, and obviously the earlier stage you're investing in, the risk is. So there was 10 guys in that class I was in. Out of the 10, 2 set up a company. So they're the average numbers. It is so, like, that's why it's tough.
And each balance sheet rate is 10%.
Yeah.
So I suppose your story as well is probably slightly different. It doesn't play with your graph that you were revenue generating in a year.
Yeah.
And I suppose from the bank's point of view, like a lot of the companies that on Brian's chart there wouldn't be revenue generating, but does this SCBI finance enable the bank to be able to go in earlier than traditionally?
Yeah, like there's 3 or 4 years ago, a
Yeah.
lot of companies they might have only had 1 year of profitability, but they're onto something they clearly have their customers and
Yeah.
their projections make complete sense. We probably couldn't have gone there
Yeah.
because the value in the balance sheet just wasn't strong enough.
Yeah.
Whereas now, the whole security, the 80% of the written by the government, it gives the customers huge comfort and it gives us huge comfort, and it has enabled us to get deals over the line and bank them now that we couldn't have done a couple of years ago.
The security would be a big.
It always has been.
Yeah.
A lot of the companies just don't have traditional bricks and mortar,
Yeah.
and those companies are. We're taking a charge, floating charge in the company, no more than what the value is. Right, company could be more technical. We're just looking at what's on the balance sheet,
Yeah.
and the company can be worth what it's going to be worth.
Yeah.
But whereas now the SBCI will come in, and when it goes above 500, like we did a loan for a medtech company last year of 2 million. All we took on top of the SBCI was a floating charge in the company. That was it. So it has changed it from our perspective, and it has enabled us to lend a lot more money into sectors that would have proved haven't before. pre-2017, in reality.
Because I know from talking to Tom last week on this, that invoice discounting was, was one of the funding models. So that probably traditionally was an area that you
Yeah,
got them
it
up.
would have been companies would go in with invoice discounting and asset financing both to term debt. So the invoice discounting effectively secured in your debtor book.
Mm.
And if you've got an invoice to a company, like Tesco will use for 100 grand, we pay out 70 grand of that.
Mm.
So the risk, like we take a view on your debtor book. Obviously, if you've got companies that are well established and your debtor book is very, very strong, we can lend more on it. Whereas companies that don't have the same level of debtor book, we either can't do it, or we can maybe only lend 50% or 40%. There's a risk factor from our perspective. Invoice discounting it's great from a working capital
You
perspective.
found it.
Yeah, we actually, after that post acquisition approach failed, we take our eye off the ball. And it was in the middle of the recession as well. And we were stuck. So we customers like Penny Ball or to like if they were in the stadium on it. And they're across there. They're actually they're sweet spot for it. So we do a big check stop. So that got us over a big no, and we learned a lot and we said never again will we be stuck with cash. That's why we started to accumulate cash.
But the reality is, Paddy Power, you issue your invoice today, the money's in your account probably next Monday. Whereas it's otherwise you might get it to January. So it gives companies like yourself, John, the access to that cash.
Paddy Power, and they usually for 60 days. Yeah, something like that. That's
It's just an issue, sometimes we see companies that maybe have some revenue. And people just won't go for them.
Okay.
Investors just won't go for them because they're looking at the scalability potential of the project.
Okay.
They might find the market is maybe potentially a bit too small, or they say, listen, this is the potential to be a really solid business, but we don't see it investors, but we're going to exit out of this in 5 or 6 years. No, this could be a really solid business and could employ good people. And a number of good people, but we don't see investors where we're going to get out of it, or we don't see the growth potential of the market. So that's just an interesting point as well, is that you can have a really good solid opportunity.
Yeah.
But it's never, or investors may not see the potential in it to do something great.
I think each of you mentioned, well, certainly last week you did on the phone to me as well about advisors, and as PwC, I'm delighted that you all gave us that plug. But is it something that, say you would often put people on the board, I think in WDC and HBAN as well. Do you see ever kind of any resistance, or even John, did you have any resistance to like external people coming in, sitting on the board, or was it always taken in a positive light as this person can bring something different to my business?
I mean, very quickly, I would say when you're sitting up at the start, you're getting advice all over,
In the pub.
And you want to be careful too,
Yeah.
because who you bring on board, because at the end of the day, for example, when we had exactly, and we had some internal strife at the stage of the company. But it's amazing how it happened when somebody sees a complete amount of money on the table, but the internal strife that we caused, So some of these signs as a shareholder or options and stuff, you want to have them on board for it's your right. Whereas if you do, it's really taking time. And so when you walk through, like you really trusted group of friends, it's when you go out. We went outside our domain into sales and marketing and finance. We were struggling with it, and you were like those advisors, or financial advisors we got, and legal advisors we got. These that were so important, I would say pay for the best financial and legal advice report. I would honestly say that, because at the end of the day, for example, we had 25 shareholders to sign in the Rapid 17. I was up in Dublin on Monday, we went on Friday, and you get 25 POAs. So all they had to sign, and then we dragged down stuff, but they didn't like that. They wanted them to sign on the day, and actually one shareholder passed away, and his family would not sign on the Friday. And I had, eventually I got it done. But that was, you can't force somebody to sign.
You didn't think you're doing what the lads did down the post office down in Kerry. And you do put people on the boards of companies, do you?
We do, yeah. it depends on the project and it can depend on the negotiations and the term sheet, because I suppose I would always say this needs to all be agreed up front. So you have a shareholders agreement that sets the terms for the investment, and different parties get different rights. So from a company perspective, I'd say don't agree to things that you're not willing to hold up, I suppose, and just be happy with the constitution of your board and your advisors. So we do tend to take a board seat depending on the stage that we're investing at. Later stage investments, maybe not, because usually there's a lot more investment in around us. But it's more, I suppose, just to make sure that the board is constituted properly and governance is correct, and just so that we know what's going on with the company, as opposed to trying to push an agenda or anything like that.
And it's not.
It's for the company to run. And generally what we're trying to do as well is ensure that they are constantly, or that they're thinking about their chairperson, that they're thinking about independent directors and who is advising them around the board. So we try to get all that up front, and in tandem with the private investors, they'll lead the charge on that as well. And I suppose everybody kind of has elbows out.
Like that's really important for the company. Sorry,
Yeah.
each seen so much,
Yeah.
so many companies
Yeah.
over the years that I never see, you know. So, and I think we had some people on the board, and they were great. I mean, great.
Yeah.
Different people in different that we trust, you know. So I definitely say you can't speak.
Like even to the point, even the independent directors that we would say, you know, try and bring in an independent
Yeah.
director to a chairperson. Usually we task the company with finding that person.
Yeah.
So find somebody who's good enough to do this, bring in some expert opinion, and we'll agree to it, you know, once we're happy with them. We vote.
Yeah, like John says, we will often we put the term sheet up front and we say, if you want to go this journey with this is what we're going looking for.
Yeah.
If you're not happy with any of that, let's leave it here now.
The type of person that you put on the board, from a bank point of view, is it like based, is it advisor, depending
so
where the gap is?
We're always trying to put in smart money,
Okay.
so somebody who knows and will be a fit. Some investors just want to put in money and don't want to draw that sort of thing. Other people, you know, have a real interest, have a background, have knowledge, can bring a lot to the table.
Yeah.
And will come in there. But we, like Jonathan, you know, if we're coming late to the table,
It's already put.
it's on the board as well.
Yeah.
If we're putting in bulk of the money or we're leading the charge, we're both insist on it.
Yeah.
And we try not to be micromanaging. We're not
Yeah.
putting in people to be, you know, hassling the promoter, because if we're doing that, they're not focused on the business, they're not driving the business, they're not working it. So we'll say, here's a few red lines. If you're up for those, let's work with it, and we'll take it on from there.
Yeah, look, thanks a million guys, you're gonna talk to John all day there.
Yeah, I know. I was gonna say,
I
that's not another
haven't
question,
even
I
asked
know.
him about how we broke America without VC money or funding from any each kind of prize money. But okay, just quickly then, thanks a million for guys for all giving up your time and the great presentations, and I'll share them out. We have a recording as well. Just when the guys are here, like it's great knowledge here in the room. If anyone 5 minutes Q&A, and then we wrap up with just tea and coffee, sandwiches. So if anyone has any questions, I have one or two, but I'll leave it to the floor here to you guys. Anyone has any?
Yeah.
So I'm starting a game development studio. Actually tried to get going with the rap one a while back, so that was I guess I'm trying to figure that stuff out. We're only 4 people, and none of us know anything about funding or business development. So we're all sort of having to deal with these things for very nice. And I've kind of taken it upon myself to learn these things and talk to people, figure out how we go forward with it. And at the moment, like, we're not making revenue or anything. We're still working on our first computer game, but we actually have a few computer games that are, I guess you could think of as products in development. And I guess one of the things that I'm struggling with is to find people in Ireland who understand the game industry. You've mentioned a lot about advisors. You mentioned a lot about how important it is to have a management team with experience in all these things. And like that, I'm just struggling to find people who have that experience. So if you're doing this kind of like, we have to just fund ourselves, because we can't, because it's our first game and first thesis, it's our first sort of venture into the game industry ourselves. We work as freelancers in our own time and during different disciplines, like artist, visual effects artist, writer, and programmer. And we don't have a business developer, person who understands finance stuff. And what we want to make is a studio that makes small computer games in Galway and with people in Tipperary and people in other parts of Europe. So I guess, yeah, this is kind of where we're at. And we're in this position where we would love to be able to get some kind of funding so that we can stop working for other people and other projects and start working in the studio. And it's really frustrating. I feel like there's so much that we don't have, so much that we can't get access to. And I like one of the things, for example, is something I was chatting with Brian, but sorry to take up so much oxygen. Ireland doesn't actually have a presence at international game industry conferences. Think about that for a moment. There's no Irish games thing in San Francisco or in Germany or in the UK. And we're often kind of, people have to sort of make it by themselves or not make it. So it's really awesome that in this building there's 2 game studios that have been going for years. Like, that's incredible that they've been able to do that. And that's why I'm going to see if we can learn from this. But the whole thing I guess I'm trying to say is that it just seems that there's so much resistance to be able to move forward. There was announcements of tax credits there in the budget and last year as well. But I went over to San Francisco. I'm just this guy talking to people in business there, saying, "Oh, hey, Aaron, it's a tax credit." It's weird that that's what I don't even have a business that's released a game yet. I'm the person doing that. So I guess I'm just wondering, like, how would you approach that?
Jonathan,
Notice that I'm throwing a lot
Yeah.
all of my business at you.
Have you seen any?
So there are 2 gaming studios here, and have you talked to those guys about how they raised their money, how they started off?
I would talk to people about business, yeah. And I was giving advice about enterprise Ireland going down that kind of route. And people choose that would be the way to go there.
Yeah, and that's a way to get into the system. You don't get a lot of money out of that, but you kind of get in with the eye and they learn about you and what you're doing. And I think there's 15,000 or something like that for going through the program. And they are it sounds like the exact sort of program that you need to be on, because they will teach you about the funding options that are available to you, about, I suppose, the more commercial aspects of what you're doing, as well as giving you money. And you get into their system. And, you know, if the competitive start fund comes up and you're a bit further progressed, you might be able to apply for that. And then that leads to HPSU. And that's just kind of how they work at an early stage. I'd also say maybe talk to your local enterprise office, see do they have something available for feasibility grants or something like that. And the first thing once you started talking was in my head was you need to talk to somebody in Westwick and have a chat with them about how to approach all of that EI type of that whole, I suppose, universe, because they're kind of the experts that we refer people to around that. But definitely speak to the other gaming companies and see.
Yeah.
Have you
Where they
invested in any gaming?
Now, it just, I mean, it was one of the first things that we've had to go to in that area, and it's a tough one.
Yes,
It's a tough one to make sleep. And there isn't a very important part, would say, we take Galway, for example, and Jonathan referenced the medtech, I referenced the medtech. You think of how many medical device companies there are from all around the world based in Galway. There are apart from up in, who's up in Parkmore there, games. Yeah. Around the country, there are very, very few of those. With the background of the medtech companies here, you have the technology, nous, expertise, knowledge. You have the university and ATU with all of their expertise and programs. You have the private people.
that all comes together. There's a missing critical mass in Ireland in the area that you're talking about, and that's a whole, that's a deficit. And an awful lot of the projects that we see in this space, they have to look to Berlin, they have to look to those international hubs to try and get that traction. So you're in a hard space, without a shadow of a doubt. But I think, as Jonathan said there, I think it's a matter of just structuring a path in terms of where do we have to go. And it's, you know, they're sort of the basics. You've got a skill set, you've got ability, you might have your own IP, you might have good customers. Okay, now it's a case of trying to figure out is, can we put an attractive proposition together around that, and where the gaps, you know, in terms of our knowledge, what do we not know, and can we get somebody who sit down with us and say, there's a hole, there's a hole, there's a hole, and this is how you go about plugging it. You know, an overnight success after 15 or 20 years. That's, you know, that's the way. No, that's the hard slog. There's the really hard slog, and the banging your head off the wall at the start. You might go this way, and you'll have to reverse, and you'll have to go down this way. So I think, Jonathan, you know, the likes of the New Frontiers program, chats to myself and my colleagues in Westwick, just in terms of this is what investors will need to see. And when I say investors, I'm talking about a private investor or Enterprise Ireland or WDC or your local enterprise office or the bank. The fundamentals are all the same in terms of what people will expect to see. So, you know, that conversation is easily had, and it's a bit of direction and a bit of focus, and you'll go a long way with that.
You just reminded me as well, also, of Brian's first slide of the day, their friends, family, all third.
Yeah.
It's same for everyone.
Network.
Yeah, and yeah, big for the CS investment fund. Yeah. So,
Focus is the crew is going to be.
Yes.
Entry.
that's correct.
Yeah, so looking positive, yeah. Yeah.
Good, Doug there, Noreen, and I'm sitting on the board of the crew now.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's great. Yeah.
I need the window. Yeah.
Still learning about it now. Can't say I'm an expert, but from a finance point of view, I'm sitting on that board. It's a great initiative.
Appreciate the time we get together.
Any other questions? See John Farrer here in the audience, who's actually a lot of this with Canvas. John, you got that there to her?
No, it's great seeing, hearing all the options open to people nowadays, you know, and John's chat there, I felt like I was actually listening to myself right down to when we were exiting our first. I've done this a couple of times in my first company. I had BES and somebody like that. The eve of the deal, somebody was inconsiderate enough to go off and die, and I don't think actually, you know, we managed to get the deal across the line, and he said we'd come back and sort it out, but I don't believe it ever was. So as I said, we could never get it signed. And these things, as you create a bigger fish posh of investors and everything, things can get very complex. I think Jonathan will probably be familiar with our tax structure as well, with how many classes of share we had, but I think they covered most of the letters of the alphabet. And all of these things are things you need to consider, like when you get the business going.
To me, it boils down to Noreen keeps saying it's the collaboration between the Westwicks, the WDC, you know, talk to your bank, and legal, get Shields here, you know, fiscal, great legal advisors, PwC, obviously, the local accounting firms, you know, just like Darren said, you know, and then obviously the mentors and the experienced people like John Bosnick here who've done it. So, you know, that's the beauty about working in a place like this, you know, meet people for coffee, bounce an idea, and they're supposed to be open and look at it.
I think John pointed out about the potential for family groups and things to go wrong. You mentioned paying for good legal advice. If that's not right at the start, everything could absolutely be a disaster. And it may not appear for 2 years, 3 years. It could be an offer's on the table and somebody holds out and says, I want to take it, and your constitution, go back to day one, isn't there, isn't in place, and it would just cause the whole thing to fall apart.
And it happened to us, we knocked on the table and there was some town stuff, and it's like stress. Because it's like, well, we talked for weeks and with legal and everything, and we got it sorted, and we said, we're gonna start this after we got through, and we clean things up a bit. Because like, I mean, that's the good thing about a failed acquisition, is that you learn a lot. So the second time, you know,
You were ready.
over there, like I was looking at the first acquisition, I was saying to Rita last day, I was driving up the road here, like a 13-year-old BMW, and I was looking up in the stand and driving over at the new Jag. And then the deal fell through, and my wife sent out an email, I'll get back in the house, I said, the house.
Thanks million to all the lads. I actually think they were excellent presentations and brought out some really good tips there. And again, to John for the great story, bringing it all to life. And thanks a million to everyone in the GTC for bringing us along in this. We're delighted to be involved.